This video is brought to you by Keeps. Stick around to hear more about the discount they're providing to the entire upper echelon community. Okay, there are some way more detailed videos in the works right now, big investigations, etc., but for the moment, I want to talk about Velma. Yes, that's right, I said Velma, which is a dismal criticism magnet produced by Mindy Kaling and funded by HBO that bastardizes every single thing you once loved about Scooby-Doo for a twisted adult cartoon. There's only 2 episodes so far, and the internet is already full of hot takes about how terrible the show is, but today I want to discuss why I'm, fairly confident that the entire purpose of this television program is to make people who see it angry and ride the wave of bad publicity to staggering overall viewership through hate watchers. No beating around the bush here, let's just dive in. Velma is a brand new HBO animated series based on the Scooby-Doo IP. Setting aside anyone's individual thoughts on that, whether or not they enjoyed it as a kid or ever even watched it in the first place, the reality is Scooby-Doo is a nostalgia-filled children's program from as far back as the 1970s. I myself watched it whenever I could, within reason, I guess, during my younger years, but what we see now from HBO and executive producer Mindy Kaling is a demented patchwork of bad jokes, insults, and poorly disguised vindictive themes meant to make every single person who watches the show angry and ride the already enormous wave of hate to colossal overall viewership. In my opinion, and keep in mind a lot of this is, of course, my opinion, this show is one of the first ever clear-cut examples where there actually isn't even a well-defined target audience, because that target audience is everyone, and the methods used to capture their interest have absolutely nothing to do with legitimate narrative appeal. For starters, though this particular angle has been covered extensively by other commentators, Velma appears to be a self-insert, as it's called. Mindy Kaling, an Indian-American comedian, actress, screenwriter, and producer, is the executive producer and writer of the show itself, which coincidentally has decided to racially swap Velma, the main character, from white to Indian, with Kaling herself doing all of the voice acting. On the surface, that's fine. I don't really care for the political discourse that rapidly devolves as soon as you mention racial character swapping, but for this particular case, yeah, it is kind of relevant. The thing to understand here is that Velma has atrocious favorability ratings. Though it is admittedly far from a perfect barometer in this case, Rotten Tomatoes is currently sitting at just 7% audience favorability, making it basically one of the worst rated shows in existence. However, approval has absolutely nothing to do with numerical success. It's not exactly an uncommon trend, but Velma is now joining a long list of predating programs such as Dave Chappelle's Sticks and Stones or Amy Schumer's Growing, which demonstrate a widening gap between critical acclaim and actual enjoyment of the audience. For Dave Chappelle, the actual audience loved the comedy show, while critics hated it. For Amy Schumer, critics loved the special, while the general audience despised her. But for Velma, it seems that while critics are still trying to pretend it's a good program, at least some of them, the barriers are coming down, and reality has begun to set in, at least on a very basic level, that this is a terrible piece of writing that should not exist and deserves absolutely no respect. Alright, before going further, it's time for today's video sponsor, who is particularly well suited for existing channel demographics. Most of you watching this are men ages 18 to 45. It's actually always been that way since the very early days of the channel, and as a result, some sponsor products are better suited for channel integration than others. If I advertised makeup, for example, it would be a complete dead end. Makeup brands pay well, of course, but what's the point if no one watching even has a passing desire, need, or use for the product? Instead, I'm here advertising Keeps, which is a hair loss prevention treatment with more 5-star reviews than any current competitor. You can order and get treated directly from your own home for a fraction of the cost when compared to other products, and they offer generic versions of the only 2 FDA-approved hair loss treatments on the entire market. 2 out of 3 men by age 35 will experience hair loss, making this basically an ideal sponsorship for the channel. If you click the link down below, you can get 50% off your first order. Again, that's a 50% discount on your first order if you click the link down below in the description today. Keeps can help prevent, in some cases actually even reverse the process of hair loss, and yes, I do absolutely get paid for this. I try to mention that every single time. I am sponsored, but that sponsorship has been one of the longest running partnerships for Upper Echelon, allowing me to continue what I do, and it's very much appreciated. Again, link down below in the description for a massive discount. Big thank you to Keeps for sponsoring the channel. Alright, time for examples. Right off the bat, we have an Indian-American screenwriter, producer, and voice actor who turned Velma into an Indian-American character, which she was not before this, and now does the voice acting herself. Heck of a start. What's next? Racially swapping Shaggy, probably the most beloved character alongside Scooby-Doo himself, who isn't even in the show, who is now black, Shaggy is, and also a notable anti-marijuana presence in the program. Gone are the days of a close-knit detective group where the lovable stoner and his best friend dog contribute to wild hijinks and investigations. Instead, we get a totally warped show where the gang is in high school, and pretty much everything about them is different and terrible. In the past, parents were likely aware of the insinuation that Shaggy was a part of, shall we say, stoner culture, or 420 culture, which let the kids, unaware of the hidden subtext here, watch and enjoy while the parents maybe got a laugh too, or picked up on hidden messages that didn't really apply to the kids, as the snacking and general comedic nature of that dynamic was allowed to play out on screen. No beating around the bush here, that's gone. It's not gone because it needed to be gone, it's gone because the writer, who also racially swapped the main character to her own race and then voice acted her, decided to make him black for quite literally no apparent reason. I'd like to say again that by itself, that doesn't matter. Racial characteristics of on-screen characters really shouldn't matter in an ideal world. But Velma isn't just doing this to find the right actors for the role, it isn't doing this to make an actual point or appeal to a separate demographic even. It's doing this to make people angry, which is working. There's only a couple of episodes out right now, but let me just frame this out for everyone. Velma is an insufferable know-it-all that despises the world, has crippling hallucinations that apparently cause heart attacks somehow, and judges everyone at precisely every single juncture. Fred, a mainstay of the Scooby-Doo universe? Yeah, he is, not kidding here, even though I wish I was, a tiny dick loser who hasn't gone through puberty. His dad is ashamed of him, he can't function beyond the cognitive level of a toddler, and therefore becomes a burden on everyone around him nearly 100% of the time. This isn't a creative choice for the betterment of the actual narrative. This is a creative choice to insult white people. Yes, I know some people will immediately start throwing out buzzwords like white fragility, but the show is plastered with examples where white people are painted as, or flat out even called, serial killers, druggies, and insensitive trolls that merely subtract from Velma's brainpower in obnoxious ways. Think about this. Fred, who is now the only white male character of any importance whatsoever, can't even cut his own food. Velma humiliates him constantly on the basis of race and class. But it doesn't stop there, because Velma is also a lesbian. Again, nothing wrong with that until you realize that she's 15, and the show is now very openly pushing sexual themes. Velma and Daphne have chemistry of sorts, not really, but in a way where they are obviously in a specific trajectory leading to sex, and broader areas of the show also seem to be designed as a sort of narrative funnel into the idea of 15-year-olds being hyper-sexually active. One demographic will be angry about Fred. Whether or not they should is up to you as the viewer, but they're gonna be. Another will be angry about Velma and her hypersexual themes. Yet another will be angry about the racial swapping, but it doesn't stop there. Daphne's parents are a racially diverse lesbian couple who adopted her, by the way, and are also cops by profession. Yet another cultural speed bump in the works here. Who draw their guns, these lesbian cop parents, who draw their guns on an unarmed teen immediately in the first episode, as well as shoot an unarmed teenager, cartoon teenager, that teenager being Fred, 2 times in his own house without a warrant as he tries to pull out a pen. Not done yet, because they also go undercover in the town's high school looking for drugs, as they paint marijuana as some sort of dangerous phenomenon, thereby pissing off yet another demographic, where these cops then start whipping out and firing tasers. I should also mention at this point that Daphne herself is apparently Asian, making 3 out of the 4 main characters in the entire show racially swapped. I can't help but consider something here, and maybe I'm way off base, but a growing section of Hollywood, as well as the entertainment industry at large, seems to now believe that the worse you make a show's writing, as long as you are aware, quote unquote, of it being bad, the better the show actually is, because of subverted expectations. However, Velma has gone so far beyond that flimsy initial premise, it is now just flat out offensive to pretty much everyone who watches it. Velma herself, as a character, is a disgustingly misanthropic person. She is self-centered, she is horribly unsanitary, example being when she just eats out of the garbage for no reason at all, and the immediate atmosphere the show does manage to cultivate is intentional destruction of every established premise that Scooby-Doo fans initially loved. For those keeping track, let's go over the list so far. The show targets and alienates white people, a lot, specifically men, but also a wider group as well, through relentless and repeated racial insults. It certainly can't be for children, or even slightly traditional viewers, because it also pushes, within seconds I might add, an uncomfortable amount of cartoon high school nudity, with a very clear push towards sexual awakening being a theme in the show. The main character, racially swapped by an executive producer of the same race, who then voice acts the character in question as well, is wildly unhygienic, deeply prejudiced, and oddly sexualized, while the parents of her potential love interest are themselves interracial lesbian cops who violate the Constitution routinely, and due process as well, to just mercilessly shoot or attack unarmed cartoon teenagers at school or in their own homes. When we really think about it, none of these characters are even remotely close to the originals, because even unspoken ambiguous character templates, like Shaggy being a part of stoner culture in some way, are being deliberately attacked, undermined, and torn down. I mean, what even is this shot right here? Are we supposed to be happy about this? Laughing? Is this brave? Is this obscene? Is it a hilarious meta-commentary on society? Or is it just bad, low-quality production that harnesses the infinite power of hate watching to drive up viewership? Now, some of you might be saying to yourselves, no shit, obviously the show antagonizes previous fans and men and white people and stoner culture, etc., because it's supposed to. It's a woke show, and that's just what woke things do. But before we go down that route, I want to specify that this bottom-scraping piece of shit also decides to insult the Me Too movement at large, in what feels kinda like unironic commentary. One joke is about how the misanthropic, horribly disgusting, garbage-eating main character speaks the truth like comedians did or used to before the Me Too movement, which, when you think about this in context, is not really going to infuriate the same demographic as half the other badly written one-liners, and instead, similar to the law enforcement themes, is more likely to infuriate the overly emotional and hypersensitive woke audience that many people are assuming it's meant to cater to. Seriously, it doesn't get much clearer than this right here. Emblematic words from the original show, Zoinks, Jeepers, Mystery Machine, etc., are names of drugs in the new Velma series that Shaggy hates. But for all of its insults to existing fans, its deliberate destruction of established lore, and its effort to piss off practically every single demographic that views it, the show probably isn't going to flop. Think about it. And I myself fall into this category, by the way, so just keep that in mind. The number of creators, outlets, and news publications that are covering this dumpster fire is enormous. Tens of millions of views about harmful stereotypes, hundreds of millions of views on TikTok where offensive jokes are propagated to the very same community that they are designed to anger. Which results in what precisely? That's right, it results in viewership. People are watching Velma, quite a lot of them, in fact. Not because they like it, though maybe a very, very small number of people fall into that category, but if they do, they just have objectively awful taste. But because they want to see it firsthand, that's the real reason. How bad is this piece of shit? Result? Higher viewership, positive feedback on all signals that indicate the speculative value of a series, despite the almost universally negative impressions of actual audience members, or legitimate viewers, and higher engagement on social media than most other shows in existence, because critics are very, very likely to post about the series, perpetuating a cycle where something terrible is being watched because it's terrible. Most television programs, nearly all of them in fact, appeal to someone, and maybe Velma succeeds in that somewhere along the line here with like the most brain-dead audience demographic you can imagine. But the overwhelming majority of people despise it, as many of them watch it anyway, making this a strong contender for the first ever example of something designed by hate, carefully crafted to alienate everyone, and deliberately structured as a sponge of negative commentary, which will probably accomplish the same ultimate payoff as a traditional cartoon. People love talking shit, and they love to pile on against bad media. Velma is the epitome of bad media, with what seems like a never-ending torrent of terrible decision-making, writing, and character choices, but when looking at all of it together, in context, it almost becomes impossible to believe that this was not done intentionally. As the saying goes, all press is good press, and while that may not be strictly true in, let's say, a political race, for example, it very much is true here and now with Velma. The horrible, creatively bankrupt decision-making of Mindy Kaling has produced something that is going viral right now. It actually is, and will continue to do so as long as it continues to offend viewers. Each new episode will have new jokes that inflame anger in one group or another, and that anger leads to massive earned media, which catapults the show higher in viewership as people watch it just to see how bad it really is with their own eyes. If the show didn't do this, what would actually happen? Well, if we're being honest here, no one would watch it. Scooby-Doo is a franchise steeped in nostalgia with a rose-tinted hue, but that lens can be shattered very easily, and the risk of trying to appeal to it when the downside of that effort is complete failure and a wasted budget is too great to be justified. In my opinion, and I stand by this very strongly, in fact, the risk of taking a beloved property like Scooby-Doo that is fairly old, if you're talking about the heyday, and just ripping it apart with maximized artistic venom is actually safer than trying to make something good. It's much more temporary, perhaps, but for the moment, capitalizing on a virality loop of sorts, where negative feedback is the engine behind it, is an easier thing to predictably accomplish, when compared to the uncertainty of actually trying to make something people will love. I hope I'm wrong. I really, really do. But this feels like a pilot program for purely malicious reboots with the only definable intention being maximized anger through the destruction of existing brand goodwill. Today it's Scooby-Doo, tomorrow, hopefully nothing, but who knows. Again, I do hope I'm wrong, but that's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. Also, don't watch Velma. Don't hate watch it. If you're gonna do it, pirate it, I guess, but just don't add to the feedback loop here where everyone is watching a show that is terrible and deserves absolutely no success, but it's going to be successful now because everyone hates it so much. And look at me, I'm perpetuating it. Like, some people will watch this video and then go watch Velma because I talked about it and said it's so bad. Because it really is that bad. It's actually one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life, but it's successful. Being bad and being successful are not mutually exclusive. Anyway, yeah, that's off on a tangent. That's not scripted. Yeah, locals and Patreon for a monthly subscription to support the channel, social media, the video sponsor, a YouTube alternative called Odyssey, etc., etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.